Hey guys, we're back with stage 10. I apologize for being a little bit late with this. I was traveling home from Italy yesterday, and I watched the stage in the plane, which was pretty cool. I was able to get the Wi-Fi to work just right. My son and I watched the stage, actually the whole stage. Made the flight go by pretty quick. So it was lagging a little bit. So like it was kind of one of those things too, where you just keep hitting refresh and refresh and refresh, and you're trying to, you're like, oh, they're doing something, but you can't really see, and you're just at the edge of your seat. So it made it a little bit more suspenseful. But yeah, I just wanted to walk through what I saw in stage 10. I think there was a lot of things, and what we can predict moving forward. First and foremost, we'll just hit on a couple of the obvious things that don't really need a lot of attention, but was pretty cool. Simon Yates winning the stage, that was awesome. I don't think Visma had any intent of him going for the stage. I think he was supposed to cover the move, be out there, and if something happened, the race would come across to him. So I think that was him and Campernots. That was kind of the idea with that. But yeah, as the race went on, the break looked like it was going to stay. Super strong break. He ends up winning the stage. He is able to capitalize off of Ben Healy, who was probably the strongest rider in the break, and he was all in for the yellow jersey. He got the yellow jersey. He pretty much sold out like the last quarter of the stage, go all in. The other riders didn't even pull, and he kept the gap to the GC riders the same. So he is now in, as you guys know, he is now in the yellow jersey. Cool achievement for him. Amazing achievement for EF. Stage win, yellow jersey, first 10 days of the Tour de France. That is awesome. And what also is pretty cool is that he looks awesome. I think he's in it for GC. I don't really, with no time trials left, there's just an uphill time trial and a bunch of really hard mountain stages. And there's going to be massive battle between Visma and UAE, Tadej versus Jonas. And so I think, Healy's going to be able to capitalize on all the shrapnel, hard races, things like that. And so I think he actually has a shot of a top 10 overall, maybe even a little bit better. So that is really exciting, and that's super cool to see him in the mix. With Carapaz having to exit or not even start the Tour de France, I think the Healy card for EF is pretty awesome. Him being able to get back into the mix for EF and have a GC rider, stage win, and yellow jersey, really awesome for that team. So excited to see that. Simon Yates continuing his amazing year, rebirth of his career, able to take that stage win earlier, Tour de France stage win, which is amazing. And then now he is massively in the lead at the, in front of it. If you look at the list, the baller of all ballers behind him in that yellow jersey. Take a screenshot at home, folks, just to see that GC. I think that's amazing. I'm sure you even slept in the yellow jersey last night and wearing it all day today, probably in the rest day. I know I would. So amazing job from both of those riders. I think that was super cool. Another person I want to hit on before we go into the GC battle is Lenny Martinez. I think it's important because, I think he's a future star. And I remember his dad, Miguel Martinez, who was top mountain bike racer. And his dad was actually a KOM winner of the Tour de France. So a lot of cycling history in that family, and it's cool to see him, French Hope on Bastille Day, taking all those KOMs up into the last few, getting securely in the KOM jersey. And I think he's a rider that can get the job done. Of course, Tadej, he might end up winning it due to the way he races and the way he's going to need to race, because we'll talk about that in a minute. But if he doesn't, it would be cool to see Lenny Martinez win that KOM jersey. He's so hot and cold. Even in the stage, he was hot and cold. And so I think a lot of that is just maybe mental, and then also just being young and new. And so we're looking to see over the years how he progresses. But I think he's going to be a big talent, big racer, and this Tour de France, hope maybe he gets a stage win and a good shot at the polka dots as we go. All right, so that's pretty much what I got for everyone else except for the Tour de France. And I wrote the GC leaders in the Tour de France. And so now I want to talk about the big battle between Jonas and Tadej, and between UAE and Visma. And I think it's really interesting because if you've followed my podcast or my notes from the beginning, I've been kind of calling out this Visma aggression from stage 1 on. Every single stage, they're at the front. They're either attacking or they're being very aggressive with positioning, or they're attacking the crosswind, or they're attacking on downhills. And just like we saw in this stage, they sent a lot of riders in the break, trying to get in the break. They end up with 2. But that's really good, obviously. Big name with Yates. And then from behind, they let UAE control the majority of the stage. And then in the very end, they took over, used up what was left of their team to make the race really hard, hopefully put Tadej under pressure, or that's what they were trying to do. And then it looked like they were trying to set up some kind of attack or something like from Jonas. And so this tactic is important because I do think that, I called out earlier in my podcast that I think it cost Jonas the time trial. This aggressive riding, it really causes a little bit more fatigue. It reduces your glycogen storages, and in those big threshold efforts like a time trial and like the mountains that are coming up, the lack of glycogen in the muscles and deep in the muscles. And keep in mind, when you're racing hard day in, day out, every muscle that's damaged a little bit more has a much harder time refueling and reabsorbing that glycogen. I remember when I was racing, and even still when I'm training, you can do a really hard stage and feel good, but have that deep muscle fatigue, or you had great numbers, you had great feelings, but you did a little bit more damage than normal to your muscles, even though you ate a ton of food and you really crushed the fueling on the bike. That extra muscular damage reduces your ability to refuel the storages that are needed. And the next day, like, even though you did all the things to recover, you just don't have the fuel that you needed to execute, to be able to do your zones like you needed. So as we approach the mountain stages, there's going to be a lot of these high glycogen dependent zones, a lot of threshold, a lot of high threshold, longer periods of time, a lot of low threshold. It's going to be used for long periods of time, day in and day out. And so it is going to be critical how the riders have navigated the efforts going into this second part of the Tour de France. If their muscles are more damaged than their rivals, they're not able to refuel quite at the same level. And this is going to be a factor, especially when we're looking at riders who are similar in zones, similar in power, and the tactic that they have to choose as we get into these harder stages is what suits them as athletes, and not necessarily what goes against their rivals. You can't really hide in the mountains. And so right now in these flatter stages and these transitional stages, you kind of can't. You can, maybe try to do things that would hurt your rivals like Visma is doing, and get away with it. But as we get into the big mountains, there's really going to be no place to hide. And so for me, I'm critical of their tactic. If you're trying to win the race, especially in this situation where Jonas is not at the same level of Pogačar. So I understand the logic of, okay, we're just going to throw everything at him every single day and try and break him with our entire team. I understand the merit and the idea with that. But cycling is really too hard of a sport. And the big key storyline that I have on this, or that I think is important to really absorb, and you guys really try to swallow this, is that Jonas really relies on his team to, 1, do well in the Tour de France, 2, win the Tour de France. And so if you're sacrificing your team to beat the guy that's already beating you, you are potentially weakening your biggest asset that you have. And so they're using this very aggressive scorched the earth strategy that they've used, and keep this also in mind, they've used it at like every meeting they've had with Tadej till now. So this isn't a novel concept and this isn't a novel strategy. The only difference is they're doing it on every stage now, opposed to last year and the years before where they were really specific about certain mountain stages. And if this is a case of, well, we know something that you don't know, I don't really like that either, because it's like, well, we know Jonas is going to be 1,000 times better than Tadej in the last week or the second lap. Like, well, how do you know that? Like, what? Like, I don't like that. I think I like to see cycling stay as stable and in line with what you see is what you get. And we've had a considerable amount of performances between the Dauphiné and now where we've seen the differences and similarities between Tadej and Jonas, and they're very closely matched up. But I would not be a fan of all of a sudden Jonas becomes incredible this last part of the tour and rips everyone's legs off and that's it. I think the way that he's going to win the tour, if we're talking like reality, it is Tadej's going to have to mess something up, which is very likely. And Jonas will take advantage of it and use his talent to win and his fitness. And so I think that is what I think the best strategy for Visma to take going into it is save the team, save him, stay there, let Tadej do his thing, stay quiet, stay out of sight. And as each stage just kind of chips away, just watch him, watch what he does. And if you look at any time that Tadej has gotten beat in the last years, it really has come down to this, where he makes a mistake, whether he goes too soon or he does too much, or he doesn't eat enough. We've seen it even last year in the Tour. The very stage that Jonas won, which pretty much the entire world, like at that moment thought that, well, here comes Jonas. He's going to win the whole Tour de France. That stage was like a mistake from Tadej. So that I think is the best strategy for Visma. And the race is so hard, and like we're seeing now that maybe UAE is sick. Maybe there's some riders that are sick. Maybe there's something going around with the team. Like, things are not guaranteed in this race. It is hard. There's going to be bad days. There's going to be bad moments. There's going to be illnesses. There's going to be crashes. There's going to be off days. There's going to be mental fatigue. And a guy like Tadej, who wins a lot, if you leave him alone and you just let him be the best and you just let him do this, eventually maybe that mental strength is going to deteriorate a little bit, where he's won a lot. He's won a lot of races. How much hunger does he really have to win? How deep is he really willing to go to win this Tour de France after all the wins that he's had and how much success he has? You got to look for a situation like that. But when you poke the bear constantly and you make this game that's happening right now, he's mad. He's on. He's the code red, the alert, the intruders are, the sirens are going off. He's aware that you are trying to take his Tour de France from him. He has the number 1 on his back. He has a yellow jersey on. Well, not anymore, but he has, right? He's the yellow jersey elect. He is the guy. He's the best in the world. He's probably the best all time ever in cycling. And so you're not going to beat this guy that knows what you're up to and has been beat by you in the past in this, and has then flipped the script and beat you in this very way over and over and over again. So I don't think that is the best strategy. Again, mainly because Jonas relies on his team. And if you are wasting or using your team to try and destroy this rider that's better than you and better than your team and better than Jonas, it's really a big use of energy and resources that could and likely will ultimately make the battle between the two much less in the end. On TV, the first 10 days, they look great. We've had a great viewing 10 days. But after this, I think it's going to come unglued. I don't see it. I see this energy used going to cost. And remember too that every time that Jonas is on the wheel of Tadej and Tadej accelerates, Jonas also has to accelerate. And he's slightly less explosive. Even though he's closed the gap, he's slightly less explosive. And it's going to cost him just a little bit more every single time. And every time Tadej goes on a flatter climb or a shallower climb or a shorter climb, an area that Tadej is more experienced and stronger than Jonas in is, like the last two attacks that we've seen, that's going to cost Jonas more than it's going to cost Tadej. Say if he was doing just steady riding or he was attacking on, steeper, longer climbs, I think that would cost Jonas less. And so that's kind of the overlying situation that I see. And I could be wrong. It's fine. Like, I've just got to, and as I do more of these podcasts and talk more, I'm obviously putting myself out there and my thoughts, and there's a good chance that I could be wrong, or very, very good. I'm just sharing what I think, and that's the whole point of this, based on my experience, racing and coaching, and being around people like Tadej on my team, that like Contador and Lance, Wiggins, all these riders, Basso, Leipheimer, all these riders that have won these big races, just watching how they do it. And so I think, I think this could end up costing them. So let's get into the nitty gritty of this stage 10 Visma tactics and what exactly happened. And basically what happened was you had Sepp Kuss and you had Matteo Jorgensen attacking and trying to set up in the last part of the race a move that it looked like maybe either Jonas could jump to, or they were trying to set something up hard enough that Tadej would be under pressure following. Now, if you watch the videos, you would notice that Tadej was not at all at any point put under pressure to cover any of these attacks. You will see that the one big thing that they achieved is they got rid of or put in difficulty Tadej's UAE team. Now, people might look at that and they might say, well, that's a weak UAE team, or this is a stupid strategy by UAE, or whatever it is. Or if you look at the quality of the riders that are in the Visma team and you take out Almeida, it makes sense, because if you look at the other riders in the peloton, or the small group that's left, it's only GC riders with 0 teammates. And so there's millions and millions of dollars of resource and high-level athletes on this Visma team. You have Sepp Kuss, who has won the Vuelta. He has won Tour de France stages. He has helped them win every single Grand Tour possible. So he is a very high-level athlete. You have Simon Yates, who won the stage, who's off the front. He just won the Giro. He is a very high-level athlete. And then you have Matteo Jorgensen, who is a podium contender in this race, who's won Paris-Nice among a lot of other big races, who is at the service in this tactic for Jonas. So it's not like we're using brains here on these tactics. We're absolutely using weapons of mass destruction to try and destroy Tadej. And if you watch him, he is literally covering these moves like it's a group ride. And so I think at this point you would need to consider, well, I think that we are potentially losing Jorgensen from this podium contention position, or maybe even winning the race overall. If something happens to Jonas or something happens to Tadej, whatever it is, we're potentially taking him out of the mix by having him attack. I counted it 6 times he attacked. And then of those 6 times that he attacked, he pulled after the attack for some time to continue to make the race hard. So he definitely did not use a low amount of energy on the stage, and he definitely used a lot more energy than anyone else in that group. And I know he's a top level athlete, and I know that he is a big time resource for that team. And that's why I'm kind of complaining about this. Is like, well, this guy, like, what if something goes wrong with him in this last part of the Tour de France? Well, we know isolated Jonas is not the best version of Jonas. And if we look at all of his Tour de France wins, it has really been set up off the back of his teammates, either bridging to them or using them to make the pace really hard in a moment to put Tadej under pressure on a long climb. Whatever it is, he has definitely benefited tremendously from his super strong team. Tadej, on the other hand, has a lot of experience racing alone. In fact, the majority of his victories that he has won, even this year in the classics, have come off of him managing the finals of these races pretty far out from the finish alone. And then flipping the script on all these people. And I believe it really came down to the way he lost the 2022 Tour de France. And then going into the 2023 Tour de France, also how he got caught out a few times as well, far away from the finish. And so I think he's really tripled down on this isolated, really hard day, team throwing everything at you, and then learning how to attack and drop those people far off from the finish. Now, the big question that we all have to ask at this point is, well, how close are Jonas and Tadej truly in zones and in fitness? Because if Tadej does decide to pull his weapon of mass destruction, which is his long range attack, at some point during one of these stages, and he does get a gap on Jonas, what is it going to look like? Is Jonas going to be able to hold him at that pace, or is he going to bleed massive amounts of time? And I believe Tadej has been experimenting a little bit with that over the course of the Dauphiné and over the course of the 10 stages in the Tour de France to really kind of figure out exactly where Jonas is. Well, we saw in the time trial that it does appear, and he wasn't his best, but it does appear that their threshold zones are quite a bit different. That would indicate that Tadej would have the upper hand in the bigger mountain stages, given he is obviously on really good shape. We saw him win 2 of the giant mountain stages in the Dauphiné in dominating fashion, and we saw him do a great time trial, and he's looked easy this entire Tour de France, already winning 2 stages, and he has a minute 17 10-day lead 10 days into the Tour de France with literally doing 0 time off the front. So looking at that data and looking at that information, I think that Tadej is a level above Jonas, and it's only a matter of time before he snaps the elastic. Now, for all of us viewers at home and for the storyline, and of course, like on stage 2, people were like, the Tour de France is over, and now everyone's changed back to, no, Jonas has a chance and whatever. I think it's great what's happening. And so I'm not like upset or anything like that. I'm just critically looking at how can Visma have a real chance of winning this race, and how can Tadej have a real chance of winning this race. So what else did we learn from Tadej kind of feeling out Jonas? Well, we learned that his acceleration, his short acceleration, is very good. Now, this should not come at any sort of surprise to any of us out there, because if you look at the last 3 years of the Tour de France, Jonas has clearly worked quite well on matching Tadej's explosive, ridiculous acceleration, especially on the wheel. In fact, you would be hard-pressed to find a stage where Tadej actually shook Jonas off the wheel for good in one of these accelerations. Now, we've seen it with one acceleration going into a climbing effort. We've seen him drop that way, right? But we have not seen him just blast Jonas off the wheel just for fun, like a local club cyclist. And so it should not be surprising that these 2 attacks that we've seen, that Jonas has been able to go with him. What is surprising, though, is the distance that those 2 get off all the other riders. In fact, I've read comments on the internet how people are disappointed with Remco's explosive power and all this other stuff. Well, I would be willing to bet that their explosive power is still really good, but these 2 riders have a next level of explosivity. So looking at the 2 accelerations, there's some key things that I want to hit on. The first thing is in both of them, Jonas has fallen off to some degree during the acceleration. Now, this is important because Tadej has only done 1 acceleration. Jonas comes off a little bit. He's able to get back on, and Tadej shuts it down. You might ask, why does he do that? Is he doing that because he's spent? Is he doing that because he's deflated? Or is he doing that because the one acceleration he was able to see all that he needed to see? Or is he doing it that the terrain coming up is not favorable to him? Well, I'm guessing that he probably did it to see where Jonas is at, to test him a little bit, and so he can make a plan in the coming days. I think that he really wants to dominate these mountain stages in a big way. There's definitely some mountain stages that he has a past with that he'd like to make right. And I think he'd also probably like to break his record of 6 stage wins. So he's got 2. He needs, 5 more to get the 7. I think it's doable, and I think he's going to go for it. So in those 2 accelerations that we saw where he was able to shake Jonas slightly, it came on the first one. It came just after 35 seconds was where Jonas finally sat up and had to lose the wheel. And then on yesterday on stage 10, it came only after 20 seconds. Well, what does that mean? Well, believe it or not, it seems as if Jonas and Tadej, the gap is opening up between the 2 of them, at least in this area. That would check out because there's been a lot of efforts done by Jonas and less efforts done by Tadej. Also, of those efforts, and this is again why I'm going to criticize the Visma tactics, is explosivity and amateur style kind of attacking and racing is going to favor Tadej a lot more than just a steady, really hard grind effort that would probably favor Jonas more. So I think that the gap between these 2 riders has gained more. Also, yesterday's climb was not nearly as steep as stage 4. It was much more shallow, and the pace prior to it was much easier. In fact, Tadej was just seconds before, Tadej was on the front, soft pedaling before Remco threw an attack, and then Lipovitz went over the top of that, and Tadej basically countered Lipovitz in that situation. So I think that looking at that information, that it is likely that if Tadej maybe does an acceleration, slightly less power in the middle of a hard effort like we saw in the Dauphiné, like somewhere in the first part of the climb or the first quarter of the climb, and then there's a bunch of threshold riding after it, there's a good chance that he is going to be able to create a massive gap there. Now, here's the next twist to all of this. And this is an important twist because you guys got to check this shit out, right? Tadej has a minute 17 in GC, and there's no favorable stages for Jonas coming up. It's not like there is a time trial coming up and we're unsure. There's an uphill time trial. Maybe that's kind of favorable. But other than that, I would say that goes in Tadej's wheelhouse as well. There's really not a stage coming up that we're looking at that we're thinking, this is where Jonas is going to have an absolute upper hand, and Tadej needs to get time. He has enough time right now to win the Tour de France as we speak. And so from today's stage on, he could just ride on Jonas's wheel and do absolutely nothing. So again, this is where the Jonas tactic and the Visma tactic just doesn't really check out completely, because you're basically doing the work for Tadej and for UAE by hammering the peloton, hammering everybody, breaking everyone down, and at the end, Tadej's going to have a much easier time riding away from everyone from a much harder race. On the flip side, if you put him having to defend his jersey and he chooses how hard he goes, he chooses there's a lot of times we know he's a showman. We know he wants those stage wins. We know he's going to be going for it. Try to catch him out in perhaps going too soon. And we saw this with his attack where he threw a little attack for no reason at all. He didn't even need to do it. I think he did it to just simply test Jonas in that moment, because I think he was confused. It was like, you set your whole team to light this whole stage on fire. Everything is burning around us. Where is your big attack? Where is your big attempt to take me down? There's nothing. Are you not doing it because maybe you're hurting? And so I think he did that effort. He saw that Jonas was able to follow him for the most part, but I do think when he reviews the tapes afterwards, he will see that Jonas fell off at 20 seconds, and had the terrain not leveled off like it did, he would have been able to ride away in that moment on a 3K climb that was very shallow. After a day where his team basically dictated the entire arsenal of attacks from when they started to the finish line. So I think that would give Tadej a lot of confidence. So looking at those facts, I think it is pretty clear moving forward how Tadej is going to have an opportunity to take time on Jonas. And perhaps one of the reasons why Jonas is not throwing attacks and is not doing any counterattacks is because he knows that the second he does that, Tadej is going to counter him. And that's going to be that little bit extra that Tadej is looking for to create that gap. Because I think at this point, all Tadej needs is a gap, right? So will be interesting to see what comes of this on the Hautacom stage. There's obviously been a lot of noise around that in the Tadej fan camp. A lot of people believe that he is putting all of his eggs in that basket. I would not argue with that whatsoever. And I think most likely he's going to do a big effort. Do things change for him now that Almeida is not there? I think a little bit. I think Almeida was, if Tadej's level is like I think is considerably above the level of Jonas, I think Almeida being able to really push a super hard pace and maybe even drop or put Jonas in absolute difficulty before Tadej goes would make things easier. But I think for us fans and for the race, I think now it's a little bit more exciting because Tadej is going to almost kind of, it looks, and I would guess his teammates will probably be more inspired and ride harder on these stages. Like we saw Narvaez and Sivakov set up that beautiful attack from Tadej on stage 6 in the Dauphiné. So I do think that we are going to see maybe the teammates rise up, but if not, we'll probably see Tadej have to set himself up for attack. So do maybe a similar attack to what we saw in the 2 stages that he threw little attacks, and then we'll see a counter, almost him probably counter himself to create that separation and put that effort in. But I think it's going to be exciting. I think with those facts that we just discussed, I think things look, I would say, a little bit clearer. And I do think that, while there could be a battle, I think most likely that's going to be the scenario that we see. I'm all for the battle. I'm all for Visma throwing everything at the race. I think it makes it exciting. I think that it's really fun as spectators to, pick apart and watch. I know my heart rate went up, my intensity went up on the plane when I saw Visma on the front. Like I said in my tweet, like they're the villains. They're the bad, they're not the bad guys. We love them. They're great people. But I mean, they kind of portray, at least at this point, they're like the evil opposition that's trying to take down the wounded and kind of hurt UAE team. So that's kind of how it looks, at least the storyline, how I see it right now. They don't seem super methodical and calculated and cold-blooded killers. They're just causing chaos and terrorizing the town, lighting everything on fire, and then taking the stage win and making people upset, specifically on UAE. So I think, they'll probably continue on with that maybe, and we'll see what happens. But I think, up until this point, I think Tadej is in a good situation. Could he be sick? Is there an illness going around on UAE like is rumored on the internet? I think that's a reasonable assumption. I think if you see 2 or 3 athletes on one team sick, like we see on UAE or off, generally he's probably going to be affected on one way or another, but by that illness. And I think it's reality when you're racing these grand tours. You get sick. I know I often got a small cold in the middle of my grand tours, and you just race through it. You're fine. Most of the peloton gets something, and so it's not super super rare. And you just race through it. And you're usually don't lose any really too much performance at all unless you get super run down. And then if you get super run down, then it will affect you a lot. But in Tadej's case, he looks quite fresh and quite strong. And so if he does end up with a cold or some kind of illness, most likely he will be okay. So I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to touch and cover. I'm like looking at this, looking at my notes here, and I think I pretty much covered everything. Oh, I wanted to add one thing about Jonas's reaction time, because I found that quite interesting. if you watch all the attacks from Tadej or when he covers Matteo or any of the other riders, Jonas is on the wheel like almost the same second that Tadej starts accelerating. And so I wonder if, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is something that they worked on in Visma. We know reaction time is a big part of sport and other disciplines, and I think generally in cycling, it's not super highly looked on. I know that we've seen athletes like Tadej use reaction time in terms of activation for core training, and so it's possible that that sort of spilled over, and now they're using it, or Jonas is perhaps using it for performance. But realistically, it is a massive part of Jonas's game because he is able to get on Tadej's wheel straight away. If you look at that final acceleration from Tadej at the end of stage 10, Jonas basically was already sprinting when Tadej was sprinting. So he jumps and Jonas almost the exact time jumped. And if you look at all the other ones, he did the exact same thing. There wasn't a moment where he was somewhat caught off guard or anything like that. And so I'm guessing that that's a big part of, or maybe not a big part, but a small part of on the Visma side and the Jonas side on some areas that they've worked to improve. We can see his acceleration is phenomenal. It's really cool to see how strong he is in the acceleration front. And then it is also cool how fast he's able to react, because you never really know when that other rider is going to attack. And I know from my experience, I've been training sprints and attacks with my son, who's younger and more explosive than I. And if I'm not on his wheel right away, it's like he'll almost gap me, and I spend the majority of that effort trying to close that gap. By the time I get to that gap, I have nothing left. I can't counter him. I'm spent. And so it looks to me like Jonas is doing a great job of getting right on that wheel straight away and not spending much of his effort really getting back to it. The sprint, I guess the second stage Tadej won on top of the Mur de Breton, it did look like he missed the jump a little bit. And I think that's really what he meant in the media when he was saying he could have done things differently. I think he perhaps was a little slow on the gun right there. And looking at the stages and the attacks that we've seen after that and before that, Jonas has been right on top of those things. And then like one last thing I want to talk about is looking at these athletes now. Everybody looks more muscular. They look like stronger riders than in my day, where there was just such a massive focus on weight loss and trying to be as lean as possible, as small as possible. And so it's really cool to see, like Tadej and Jonas, Matteo, like, riders that are, the big dogs are of the Tour de France are really focused on power. And I think that is kind of the future and the next level. And a lot of the new performance increases that we've seen in the peloton is these riders that are really focused on fueling for performance, fueling for growth, and not constantly like looking at the scale and trying to get as small as possible. I know they're lean, and no surprise there, but there's definitely strong muscle mass there. There's definitely good body weight that they're using to perform well, and really see these super small arms and little tiny legs and just completely atrophied away bodies. So pretty cool on that front. I'm proud that my son has this kind of generation to look up to, and people like Pogačar and Jonas that are just really focused on performance and really focused on being healthy, and definitely seems a lot less than some of the negative stuff that transpired or was in the discussion during my days. So cool on that. I'm loving the Tour de France this year. I hope you guys are as well. And I'm trying to give as much of my opinion and my insight as possible. I know I'm kind of like constantly talking about the Visma strategy and how I'm not a fan of it, but by no means do I think Visma is like not an amazing team, and those are not amazing riders. I'm just putting out there suggestion that I think might help serve them better. But again, I'm not them, and by no means is my discussion here any sort of minimizing their ability or minimizing the quality of the people that decide their tactics or anything like that. I'm just trying to put it out there and say, hey, look, I think this is possibly what could happen because of this, and what would happen if they did something different. So that's it. Thank you guys for listening. I'll be back. Now I'm back in the US. We're going to do more of those and more of these, and I'm going to get my wife here. And then we have something cool too. We have Tour de Form. We're going to open it up to the public, and we're going to do it after the Tour de France. So this is going to be an online Tour de France challenge where we're going to take on and learn all these different cool coaching and technique and training things that the Tour de France people do. I'm going to go stage by stage, break it down with each of the people that are in this challenge, share what the riders that won or what the best performers did physically with their power, their zones, their training, their fueling, look at what they did with their technique, look at what they did with their mindset, look what they did with their strategy, and then give you guys a personal challenge to take on that day. So I hope you guys join me. I'll be posting that here shortly. I'm just finishing it up, Tour de Form, and we will start that right after the Tour de France. And so if anyone is having any Tour de France post-tour letdown, I've got a solution for you, and I hope you guys will join me in that. All right, so that's it on my podcast. Thanks, guys, for listening, and I will see you tomorrow for a flat stage and then the big Hautacom stage on Thursday. Can't wait for that. All right, later.